Good morning, good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from Israel. I happen to be in America this week, so I am lined up, I believe, aligned with most of you. And so a little bit of housekeeping. We are meeting again, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week, same time. Next week will be a shiur on Yehuda. When I planned this series, I was very ambitious, and I really thought that I'd be able to accomplish surveying a shevet a week. It doesn't seem to be the reality. So it looks like for most of the Shvatim, at least, especially if we're going to do some excursions into their nachalot, into taking somewhat of a virtual tour or a more of a prolonged discussion of their territories, then we're going to need 2 weeks. So next week we will start with Yehuda. Today is Levi, which we will Be'ezrat Hashem accomplish just in one day. Next week Yehuda, and then the following week, I believe it's the 23rd, Monday the 23rd. Baruch Hashem, it's wedding season, and I will not be available for a shiur. Sorry, let me just turn. I think someone is trying to contact me. Let me just shut down my WhatsApp. Okay, sorry about that. The problems with trying to also parent when you're 6,000 miles or kilometers away. Apologies for that. That day I will not be available. So next week we will have shiur. The following week we will not, and then continue on with Mondays throughout the summer as scheduled. Okay, so let's jump right in to Levi. Now, we weren't together last week because of Shavuot. I do hope, though, that we had a chance to learn together in that pre-Shavuot marathon, which was a lot of fun for me. So we're picking up with Levi after having exhausted, I think, Shimon. And so it's a kind of natural progression. And so I'll be reminding myself and all of us about Shimon throughout the shiur, because Shimon v'Levi achim. Shimon and Levi are so tightly bound to each other that when we talk about one, it's almost impossible not to reference the other. So there will be some overlap with Shimon. Let's get started with Levi's conception and his birth and his naming. Vatahar Od. And so here we're in the 29th chapter of Bereshit, and Leah has just born, well, in the verses at least, she has just born 2 sons for Yaakov, Reuven, and Shimon. Those are Psukim 32 and 33. So Lamed Bet and Lamed Daled and Lamed Gimel, and now we're in Lamed Daled, the 34th verse, one son after another, one verse following another. She conceives again, and she gives birth to a son, Vatomer, Ata hapa'am ilave ishi elai. This time my husband will be attached to me, or will be bound to me, will be joined to me in some sense. Ki yaladeti lo shlosha banim, al kain kara shmo Levi. For I have born to him 3 sons, and therefore his name was called Levi, or he called his name Levi. We'll explore that in just in a few minutes, that particular formulation, which we haven't seen yet. Al kain kara shmo Levi. So the naming here of this son is in a sense aligned with the previous son's births, in that the first son to be born was also named out of a hope to somehow find that Leah should find her way towards a relationship with Yaakov, or find her way within the family. Ki ra'ah Hashem et oni. God has seen my affliction and has given me a son, and this son will help alleviate my affliction. Shimon, ki shama Hashem ki snua anochi. God has heard that I was hated, that I am the disenfranchised one within this family, the marginalized one. And so this son will address that need somewhat. And now with the naming of Levi, it is still in the same it's aligned with that same concept of my husband will now be joined to me. This son will strengthen or even ensure a bond with my husband, where the first two sons were building towards that bond. This son will concretize that bond. Ata, now, hapa'am, this time around, yilaveh ishi elai. There's less of a sense of despair and distress. God has seen my affliction. God has heard that I am hated. And now it's almost like there's a turning point. Leah has turned, and we sense an absence of despair. And so that kind of lightening, as it were, of the mood and of her sense of her place, her lack of despair, is something that is acutely sensed by the sages. And his birth is seen, even though we have no reason in this text so clearly. It's only alluded to by the subtleties of language here. It's certainly not alluded to in the stories of this boy's life, of Levi's life, that he is something special or that he is different than his elder brothers. If anything, I'm going to keep on saying Shimon v'Levi achim. The two of them are twinned. They're entangled in their schemes throughout the book of Genesis. But the sages are going to see with Levi's birth an auspicious omen, an aura surrounding this child that will only be manifest later on in the tribe's development. Let's start to see how the sages are going to build this specialness into Levi's character. Whereas perhaps, and I'll stress again, I do believe it's alluded to in the nuances of the language here over and against Reuven and Shimon's naming, but I don't think it's explicit. It's not like with Yehuda, Hapa modeh Hashem, which we're going to get to. Now I shall thank God, which is a totally different tack that Leah takes. She's a totally different person once Yehuda comes. But Levi is certainly a development, but we'll see the sages take it to places that perhaps the pshat does not acutely indicate them to or direct them to take it to. But that's, of course, we know. I don't know if there are any Kohanim or Levi'im or Benot Levi'im or Benot Kohanim here studying with me together today. But we know that the Levites are the most pedigreed and proud of and staunchly protective of pedigree. And so we have to establish why that is. So let's look at this very interesting Psikta Rav Kahana, who's going to notice something about Levi that he says is intrinsic to his very concept, regardless of how he developed as an individual or as a tribe. It's intrinsic to his concept. And the Psikta Rav Kahana here is basing the midrash on a verse in Shmot Yutet, which is in the context of the giving of the Torah, and Chodesh Hashlishi, which is the month we're in now, right? Nisan Iyar Sivan, the third month. And Psikta Rav Kahana says everything Torah-oriented is in threes. HaTorah Mishuleshet. The Torah itself is a tripartite construct of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. We have the Tanakh. We have the Chamisha Chumshei Torah and the prophets and the scriptures. Those three elements together comprise the Torah. V'ototeha Mishulashim. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. This we're going to get back to. This I would love your help with. I struggled with this particular detail. The translation is its letters are threefold, Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Now, clearly there are many more letters to the Hebrew alphabet, but these three letters seem foundational. The Yisrael Mishulash, and Yisrael itself is divided into three parts: Kohanim, Levi'im, Yisrael. Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, which we which we are aware of throughout our calendar and throughout various different rituals and Torah readings, etc. Bnei Avot Shlosha. We have three, we're the children of three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Umoshe Shlishi Benehem. And Moshe functions as almost like a third element among the three parts of Am Yisrael, God, and Moshe. Meaning, the Midrash is working off of a verse in Deuteronomy, Anochi Omed Ben Hashem Uvenechem, where Moshe is saying, I stand between you, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, the Israelites, and God. So there's that tripartite structure. You have the Avot, and you also have God, Israel, and Moshe. V'ototav meshulashim, and the one who delivered the Torah is an individual whose name is comprised of three letters, Moshe, umishevet hashlishi, and he is from the third tribe, Ruvain, Shimon, v'Levi. Ve'ototav meshulashim, and the third tribe is comprised of three letters, Lamed, Vav, and Yud, Levi. Ve'achim shlosha, and there were three foundational siblings who were instrumental in delivering the Torah, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. V'nitzpon l'shlosha, and he was hidden for 3 months, v'titzpeneu shlosha yerachim, where Yocheved hid Moshe for his first 3 months. V'hayom hashlishi, and it was on the third day, ki bayom hashlishi yarad Hashem le'nei kol ha'am, we have the Shloshet Yimei Hagbala, and then the Yom HaShlishi following that, which is the giving of the Torah, V'achodesh HaShlishi, and it was given in the 3rd month. So what this midrash is doing is highlighting the consistent tripartite aspect of the Torah. It's consistently portrayed in threes. Now, just getting back to that three that tripped me up here, where there are 3 letters of the Torah, Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Again, there are many more than 3 letters of the Torah, but I think that perhaps one way to understand it, and maybe some of you have a different way to understand it, and if you do, then please write it in the comments, or please say, I have a way to understand it, and we'll get to that at the end of this shiur. Just right there that you have a new idea, is that Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, Aleph meaning always symbolizing unity, and Bet symbolizing division. Whenever you have 2, then that implies some kinds of an antithesis. So you have, let's say, the 3-part dialectical of the thesis, and then the antithesis, and then the third element would be the synthesis, is the building block foundation of all discussion, right? Where you have to have a thesis, and then you have to have a pushback against it, and then you work between the thesis and the antithesis to find the synthesis. And so that Gimel, the Aleph Bet Gimel seems to almost bring like this great harmony to the world, which, by the way, although again, and I've said this before, and I will never claim to have any handle on Torah HaKabbalah, from the little that I've been exposed to, if we compare the Avot to the 3 let's say major qualities of Avraham being Chesed, and Yitzchak being Gvura, and Yaakov being Tiferet, then Chesed and Gvura are at loggerheads with each other, and Tiferet is the synthesis of Chesed and Gvura. I'm not going into that. I am wholly underqualified to do so, so I shall not. But the Tiferet definitely embodies that, the harmony and the synthesis of the unity faced with disunity, and then the synthesis of finding a solution. So Levi as the third, and Moshe as the embodiment of Levi, is the reflection or symbolic of Kol HaTorah Kula, of the completion, of the perfection of the Torah. And so even though here it's the Midrash is kind of oblique in its reference to Levi, and our whole shiur is about Levi, I did want to bring this idea because I find that even before we get into Levi's own development, the concept of three and being of the third born, or in this family at least, carries with it a certain innate harmony. Indulge me, if you will, just for 1 or 2 minutes while I give over an idea which I tend to come back to over and over again for its beauty and for its for I think its relevance. When we talk of threes and when we talk of the number three, al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, right? There's always we sense that three indicates a certain stability. A two-legged stool is not nearly as stable as a three-legged stool. We prefer aesthetically even the possibility of a triangle or a circle than we do to a line, which leaves us uncomfortable with its unlimitedness, with its 2 points. We prefer the 3 points. The aspect of three and its stability is reflected in the name of the letter that symbolizes three in the alphabet, which is Gimel. Gimel Mem Lamed means ligmol means to wean. Lihigamel means to be weaned off of, right? Now, what does it mean to wean? It means to be independent and to be able to stand on your own, to have stability and security. So that's why the word for weaning, and the first one who was weaned being Yitzchak in the Torah, and is one who certainly was an independent and stood on his own, which, by the way, is why the Hebrew word for a dromedary is a gamal, right? A camel, which eventually has taken on in later permutations. I think it must have been Greek that moved gamal to camel. Not certain about that, but gamal is called such because of the animal's independence. It can survive for quite a long time without needing to be watered or to be fed. And so you see the interplay there. Now I'll end this off with my famous permutation, with my, not famous, my favorite permutation or application of the three, and that is gimilut chasadim. When we have this term gimilut chasadim, you see there that it's the synthesis of chesed of Abraham and the din of Yitzchak, in that gimilut chasadim means weaned kindness. It means providing kindness in the way that will allow for the recipient's independence. So we seek not to do acts of chesed, which reflects the one and the Avraham and the abundant, abounding chesed. We need to wean that kindness and limit it. Yitzchak is all about the limitations. That's what Gevurah and Din are, in order to do the proper acts of kindness, which are gemilut chasadim, which are, of course, allowing the recipient to be as independent, as dignified as possible, which again is why the Rambam will say that the absolute kindness is to provide a job for someone. I realize I went off on a tangent, but we will get back to Levi, who again is a permutation of this idea of synthesis, of the stability, of the harmony, of the gimilut chasadim, of the three. That number three. Now, let's get back into Levi. I hope you enjoyed that excursion with me. Now, with Levi, as I had said, the sages aren't going to wait until he does something good on his own. They don't want, because we all know, we're coming at this with a preconception that Levi is the tribe that was chosen to serve in the temple and to be God's chosen servants, and they have a special rarefied status. But the sages, of course, want to read this into his birth, again, with the triggers that we saw in the text itself. So let's see further how they do so. Well, let's look at Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. When Yaakov was trying to return back into Eretz Yisrael after his sojourn in his father-in-law's house and his building of his family, then he was, as we know, he was, it wasn't such a smooth journey back into the land of Israel, into the land of Canaan, and he wrestled with an angel there. And one of the conversations that he had in this wrestling, in this acute existential angst or metamorphosis that he went through over that night was the following conversation that the Malach challenged him with. Yaakov, lo natata ma'aser mikol. You fell down on the job, Jacob. Before you left Eretz Canaan in Beit El, you had vowed to God. Now, this is back in Bereshit Chavchet, in the 28th chapter of Bereshit, where Yaakov had vowed to God that Kol asher titen li aser asrenu lecha. Everything that you give me, I shall tithe. Now the angel said, wait a second. When you were gone that whole time in Lavan's house, you had a lot of kids and you didn't tithe them. You didn't separate any of them off for service to God. You had all of these children and you didn't give a tenth of them to me. Ma me asa Yaakov. What did Yaakov do? Hifrish arba'a bechorot l'arba'a imahot. Now, unlike I'm not enough of a historian of I guess it would be the medieval period or even leading into the modern period to know this is only from distant memory. Used to be that the firstborn or one of the sons, maybe not the firstborn of like a Christian family, would be sent to be a priest or to somehow that's registering. I could be way off here, but unlike that model, here Yaakov says the firstborns are not counted within the counting. They are not going to be considered as viable options in service of God. Hifrish arba'a bechorot l'arba'a imahot, maybe allowing each mother to have her firstborn and not have to sacrifice him to God, not literally sacrifice him, I mean give him over to service to God. Minishtayruu shmona banim, and he's left with 8 more sons. Hitchil mishimon vegamar bibinyamin shebeme'ei imo. Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, we can't do Dan because he's a firstborn. Naphtali, we can't do Gad. Asher, we can't do Yosef. Binyamin, the old Hitchil mishimon. Shimon, Levi. Levi ends up as the 10th. Ve'ala Levi ma'aser kodesh laHashem. Shne'emar ha'asiri yihiyeh kodesh laHashem. So this nice little mathematical targil here, this exercise of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, will find another aspect of the chosenness of the special aura, the auspiciousness of Levi, in that even though he's the third born, apparently, if we do the calculation, he's really the Asiri, he's the 10th, and therefore he's Meiser. He's separated off. He's off limits for family use and should be in service of God. Again, nothing in the text indicating that Levi's rarefied status at this point. But let's look at Midrash Hagadol, which has 2 very beautiful insights. The first is the following. Batahar od bateled ben. Getting back to our original verse. Al kain karashmo Levi. Now, her naming of Levi seemed to be in a personal sense, now my husband will be further attached to me. But the Midrash is taking it in a different direction. Shira'ata she'atid latzeit mimenu banim shemilavin et Yisrael le'avihen shebashamayim. That she had a prophetic vision, Imalea, that in the future, this child will produce children that will attach Israel to their heavenly father. And these children are Moshe and Aharon. So the idea of hapam yilaveh ishi elai, now my husband shall be attached to me, is clearly about her own personal sentiments, But hidden more deeply, a certain subtext that Chazal are reading out here is that this Levi will serve a national purpose of attaching the nation to God, of being their manhigim ruchaniim, their spiritual advisors and their spiritual guides, and attaching Israel back to the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, this is a brilliant insight. B'chulhu k'tiv vatikra. With every naming of every child, the language is always Vaitikra. The mother gives the name, including with Binyamin, by the way. And we know Binyamin was named both by Rachel and by Yaakov. The verse itself delivers that. However, Vayikra Balevi. It's the masculine that's used with Levi. Al Kain Kara Shmo Levi. Therefore, he called his name Levi. Now, who could it possibly be who is calling this child Levi? The assumption would be perhaps Yaakov. Maybe Yaakov said, okay, you named Reuven and Shimon. It's time for me to have a turn or for me to step in. And which, by the way, would also further cement the auspiciousness and the joy, the specific joy of Levi entering the family, because it would show Yaakov's involvement. Okay, Leah, I'm noticing you. You've borne me my third child already, and now I see your place in the family, and I shall be attached to you. And that's why Jacob, called his name Levi. But that's not what the Midrash is saying. The Midrash says the following: Melamed shehichrizu alav milamala, that God Himself named this child Levi, Levi Shmo, shaliva v'hilvad hamelech. This one will accompany the king. So the reason why this midrash is so powerful is that it's so strongly rooted in the text. There is an anomaly with Levi that doesn't exist with the other Shvatim, that with the other sons of Yaakov, that really has to be taken into account. And I expand on it further, and I want to just show you some of these, this wonderful tool of Sfaria that I've been using for these source sheets, which has tribal lands on it. So I can just quote from tribal lands, and which is useful because I didn't bring a copy of the book with me. If we look together at some of the other midrashim that are brought about the rarefied status, the special chosen status of Levi from birth. Let's take a quick survey. The sages view Levi as unusual from birth, granted special status that separated him early from his brothers. Yaakov chose Levi and Yehuda to accompany him from Beit El when Yitzchak summoned him for a visit. So when Yaakov re-enters Eretz Canaan and he's with all of his family, there are stories that the Midrash is relaying to us that, of course, are not in Pshat. And the point of this story, which is that Yitzchak is calling Yaakov chooses Levi and Yehuda, right? So it doesn't, of course, the text doesn't say anything about this visit, and it doesn't say anything specifically about Levi and Yehuda. But the sages want to say already from childhood, Levi and Yehuda were separate and were chosen for this special honor. It was there that Yitzchak blessed Levi and taught him the laws of priesthood. Now look what we can do with this feature here. I just discovered this. I don't know if you can see this, but when I click on that, it takes me to the source in Sfaria, and then I'm going to just show you just this one cool thing. All my footnotes are here, so it tells me, even though I don't want you to trust me on my paraphrase of the Midrashim here, I'd like you to know that they're all sourced, they're all anchored in different midrashic and apocryphal and pseudepigraphal material. So don't take my word for it. Just you can look yourself. I just want to, here, let's see how I can go back to, here we go. I can close that up. Okay, so now, it was when Isaac saw Levi, then he taught him the laws of priesthood. Other sources claim that Levi strongly resembled Jacob, which of course is reflecting very positively on Levi. It should be noted that most rabbinic sources are going to say that who most closely resembled Yaakov from all of the sons? Yosef, not Levi. But It's not like anyone ever claimed that Shimon resembled Yaakov or that Naphtali resembled Yaakov. And when Yaakov died, Levi was forbidden from carrying his beer and contaminating himself, since in the future he would have to carry the Aron HaKodesh, so he couldn't take on Tumat Tamet. Now, see what Chazal are doing here. There's no indication of Levi's specialness until he acts to become special. But Chazal would like to grandfather his specialness into his concept and conception and childhood. Okay, so one more section here from Tribal Lands before we move on. As we leave the tight family stories of Breshit and begin to talk about the development of Am Yisrael in Egypt, it's quite startling just how much Levi stood apart from his brothers. Again, non-textually, let me stress, please, that at the very end of Genesis, Yaakov strongly lambasts Shimon and Levi together and does not distinguish one brother from the other. So we're leaving Bereshit, Genesis, feeling that Levi is as much maligned as Shimon is, but the sages are going to seek every opportunity to redeem him from that curse and from that negative, from that ignominy, from the negative reputation, and they're going to try and find redemptive qualities as much as they can, even when he develops into a tribe. First, a rabbinic gloss declared, without precedent and seemingly unwarranted by any textual analysis, again, everything here, you can check the sources, that the nation of Israel only became slaves to Pharaoh after the death of Levi. So it would take Levi dying so that he wouldn't see the humiliation of the Israelites becoming slaves to Pharaoh. I'm certain that some of you have heard of this midrash before, especially those who are Leviim among you, that there is the famous midrashic motif that Levi was never enslaved in Egypt because they were separated, and so Paro never enslaved them. Of course, not indicated at all in the text. Additionally, they were singled out as the only tribe to keep Milah when they were in Bnei Yisrael. Again, no textual clue to this whatsoever, but Chazal push hard on forcing our sense of Levi as Meiser, as chosen, as special, as the Melave of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the one who's attached to God more than the other tribes are, and who will attach Bnei Yisrael in turn to God. Now, where is it that we can say for certain that Levi distinguished themselves and separate from Shimon and diverge from Shimon and become themselves, grow into themselves? And the first place we see this in two places. The first place is in the context of the Chet HaEgel, where Moshe sees Bnei Yisrael singing the golden calf after he receives the Torah and descends from Har Sinai, and he calls out famously he says, Mi la Hashem Elai, whoever is for God, come to me, and who gathers unto him, Kol B'nai Levi. It is not that he called for his tribesmen to come and avenge God. It's that he said, Mi la Hashem Elai, and who heeded the call? The Levites. And he says to the Levites, each of you take up a sword and go through the camp. V'hergu ishet achiv, ishet re'ehu, ishet krovo. The pain of these words is a tripartite pain here. It's like it's repeated thrice. Kill your brother, kill your friend, kill your relative, kill whoever has done this sin against God. And this is what they do. Vayasu b'nei Levi k'dvar Moshe. And it was the Levites who heeded the call. Vayomer Moshe, and Moshe says, Mil'u yetchem hayom laHashem ki ish b'vno v'achiv v'latet alechem hayom bracha. So there's something about this act that they did that was that was a pivot point for them. That changed the course of this tribe's destiny because they did not hesitate to act. And as Moshe is recounting the events of the exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah and the wilderness experience, at the end of his life, in the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, in the 10th chapter, he's remembering, he recounts this event, and he says the following: Ba'etahi, at that time, at the time of Matan Torah and Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, Hivdil Hashem et Shevet HaLevi, Laset et Aaron Brit Hashem, La'amod lefnei Hashem l'sharto, ulevarech b'shmo. That was the moment when God separated the tribe of Levi to carry the Aaron and to serve him as a rarefied class, and to bless Israel in his name. They would be almost like a conduit of blessing up through this day. Al kain lo haya leLevi chelek benachala im echav. Levi remains separate. He does not just have a tribal portion as do Dan and Asher, but he remains separate. Hashem hu nachalato. He has to be available in service of God. And so that moment of choice, of fashioning his own destiny by heeding Moshe's call, was, one can say from Pshat level, what makes Levi special. But again, Chazal always want to see hints and glances and shadows of that potential earlier on. I think that is obvious. I don't have to justify the work of Chazal, but if we looked again at the naming of Levi and that strange pasuk, not only with the lightning after Reuven and Shimon, but the Karashmo Levi, the Yesham Alismoch. Chazal have a very strong textual pin to read all of Levi's glory back into Bereshit, where it's nearly entirely absent in Pshat. Okay, so here Rashi is just making this explicit for us in case we were wondering. Ba'etahi is at what time are we talking about? We're talking about that first year after the exodus from Egypt, to item ba'egel b'nei Levi lo ta'u, when you b'nei Yisrael all sins with the egel hazahav, but b'nei Levi didn't, and that is when God separated them from you. Okay, so that is definitely the pivotal moment for this tribe. But in the context of Shimon v'Levi Achim, Shimon has not fallen from the graces of Hashem or Moshe until Shittim. We talked about this together a couple of weeks ago, where Shimon basically fell deeply and irrecoverably in his position as the erstwhile or potential Bechor after Reuven had lost his Bechorah. This happened in other words, even if Levi was chosen for the role of the melaveh of God, to be the accompanier of God or the servant of God, then it doesn't mean that Shimon would not have taken on the Bechorah. Seeing as though it wasn't going, Reuven was clearly in the blessings of Yaakov, not going to be the firstborn in terms of rights. It should have gone to Shimon, but as we saw, Zimri ben Salu and his actions in leading his tribe in Shittim, in the sin of Baal Peor and the women of Midian and Moab, and all of the wrongdoing, the idolatry and the sexual immorality of that event, was remedied by that was all Shimon's sin, and it was remedied by Pinchas, the descendant of Aharon. And here, even though we're not talking about the tribe of Levi, we're talking about one of the golden boys of Levi, the grandson of Aharon, who ended the great distress of Am Yisrael, put an end to that event, and was the Kana'i LaHashem, was zealous for God. And I discussed 2 weeks ago the difference between zealousness of Levi and the jealousness of Shimon. And so I'll just read it through quickly one more time because it's so essential to seeing how these two brothers and tribes diverged. You can read it here as well on the source sheet. Here in this event, even though Levi had already established themselves as the servants of God, this is where Shimon and Levi will diverge, and where Levi will no longer carry the name of the brother of Shimon as a tribe. He doesn't have, the brother of Shimon would now be Yehuda, if you remember from previous shiur. Shimon and Levi, who were once the closest of kin, Shimon and Levi Achim, dramatically diverged. The trait of Kanaut, or zealousness, Pinchas being from Levi, being a Kana'i Hashem, surfacing earlier in Levi with Shem, right, in the stories of Breshit, where Shimon and Levi were Kana'im. They were zealous over the integrity of Am Yisrael. And it surfaced with Shem, and then the golden calf, where Levi again exercised their zealousness on behalf of Mila Hashem Elai, on behalf of God. Whoever is for God, join me, Moshe cries. And now here in Shittim, with Pinchas's act, was pure in one brother and sullied in the other. It was pure in Levi and it was sullied in Shimon. It was Pinchas, not Zimri, who was the paradigmatic Kana'i, zealous for the honor of God. Remember, Pinchas is the opposite of Zimri. He defeats Zimri. Zimri was jealous for his own tribal honor. Where both brothers had started off with a great deal of Kanaut, that can diverge into the jealousness for one's personal ego, for one's personal honor, for one's personal place, or it can remain pure and l'shem shamayim, something which is separate from one's own ego. Well, and it's not in service of me, it's in service of God, is what Zimri is saying. It's not in service of us as a tribe, it's in service of God that we kill those who are worshiping the golden calf, the Levites were saying. Zimri was jealous for his own tribal honor, as opposed to Pinchas, who was zealous for the honor of God. While coming from similar roots, his was far removed from the zealousness of Pinchas, which is described wonderfully by Rav Matis Weinberg as an act of true love, whose only object is the strengthening of the ties between God and man, not the crushing of opposition. Jealousy is petty and hostile. Zealotry is noble and ultimately seeks peace. It was with zealous Pinchas that God forged his covenant of peace. A jealous character does not value the glory inherent in the distinctiveness of his friend and wants to abrogate the other's gifts in favor of himself. A zealous character, in contrast, glories in the uniqueness and greatness of the other. This is one of my favorite lines. I worked hard on this one. He cherishes not only his own integrity, but also the integrity of the whole that is formed by the utter individualism of its parts. What I meant by that was that a zealous character is zealous to preserve his own integrity, to be true to himself, to live up to all that he hopes for himself. But he also is zealous that every other individual is able to do the same on his own terms, because the whole is only as strong as the perfection of its parts. And so, whereas you have a Shimon and a Zimri who were zealous, yes, for their own tribal development, they didn't care, or it wasn't, their care for the integrity of Am Yisrael was, while evident in Shechem, was not evident in Shittim. And when it came to Levi, their care for their own tribal integrity did not in any way impinge or damage at all their care for the integrity for the rest of Am Yisrael. A fine line divides jealousy from zealotry, but that exacting distinction makes all the difference in the world. And I want to illustrate this in the few minutes that we have left with the golden boys of Levi. I mentioned Pinchas, but of course the real shining stars are Moshe and Aharon. And I bring here two verses which the Midrash collapses together. One verse is from Shir HaShirim, which talks about the love between the Dod v'Raya, but in the sense of if only we could be, it could be that we were siblings so that we can demonstrate our love. Mi tencha ka'achli yonek shtei mi. If we were siblings, then nobody would be askance at us, would think twice about our public displays of affection. And sa'acha bachutz eshakcha. I would find you outside, I would kiss you. So that's one verse just to keep in mind as we enter into the Midrash. And then, which you can already kind of intimate or understand where the Midrash is going to lead when it talks about Moshe and Aharon and the epitome of brotherly love. This next verse in Shmot, where God tells Aharon, Lech likrat Moshe HaMidbara, go out to greet Moshe, who's arriving into Egypt. Vayelech vayifkeshehu behar ha'elokim vayishaklo. And Aaron goes out and he meets him at the mountain of God and he kisses him. So the Midrash here collapses the two. I brought two versions of the Midrash. The first one I brought for fun. It's not as good of a version. In other words, it doesn't make the point as clearly. And so I'll skip to the second one. The only reason I brought it was it has this great story at the end, which the second version doesn't have. The first version that I bring here is Shmot Rabbah, and the second version is the Tanchuma. So we'll look at the Tanchuma. I just wanted to show you this version in Shmot Rabbah. I love every single time the Midrash mentions places, because especially as a tour guide, I love places and I love the layers of places, and especially because so many of the places mentioned in Midrash are in my neck of the woods, because so much of the history of the Chachamim takes place in the Galil and the north. So let's look at the story. Rabbi Pinchas said there was an incident involving a brother and a sister, one who was in Gush Chalav and one who's in Beit Maron. So Beit Maron is probably Meron, the Meron that we're familiar with near Tzfat. The house in Gush Chalav caught fire. The house of the brother caught fire, and his sister came from Beit Maron and fell upon him and was hugging him and kissing him. And she says, I know that, in public, brothers and sisters don't exactly embrace. It's not it's not the same as Aaron and Moshe. But I didn't care, because I was so relieved that you are safe, right? Like it brought to mind immediately all of those searing videos of the hostage families like waiting to greet their loved ones, right? Like and they know that these videos are going to be in the public sphere for the world to take in. Nobody, you think any of the families care what shirt they're wearing or if they had their hair done? Who cares? It's the great relief of seeing your sibling who you love in whole and not damaged. And so again, that was a little aside, but I bring it because I just love the fact that I know exactly, here I can drive in 7 minutes. It would take me to get from Meron, Beit Meron, to Jish, which is Gush Chalav. So here's the sister, and there's a valley in between. So Meron is a very, very high mountain, and Gush Chalav also sits on a mountain with this valley in between. She sees her brother's house on fire and is relieved that he is safe. Now getting to our Midrash. Thank you again for all of these indulgences. Davar acher, lech likrat Moshe HaMidbara. Go and greet Moshe in the Midbar. This is as God tells Aaron to do. Zeh ma shekatuv. This is in consonance with that gorgeous verse from the Song of Songs from Shir HaShirim, Mi tencha ka'achli, if only you were as a brother for me. Yisrael omrim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mi tencha ka'achli. Israel says to the Holy One, if only you were, if only you could be as my brother. But wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. All brothers hate each other, right? If we go through the laundry list of near fratricide and even forget about near fratricide, attempted fratricide, accomplished fratricide in the book of Genesis, then the list is endless. You have Cain, you have Hevel, you have Yishmael versus Yitzchak, you have Esav versus Yaakov, you have all the Shvatim who just want to kill their brother, right? What does this verse how is this verse ever found, this gorgeousness of this verse? If only you were as a brother for me. God forbid we should be as a brother. Brothers all hate each other, right? How, when Israel through Shir Hashirim, when the Raya is speaking to her dod, to her beloved, and saying, if only you could be as a brother to me, what brothers are we talking about? The brothers from Levi, Moshe v'Aharon, Shneamar, Hine ma tovu manaim, shevet achim kam yachad, with that verse from Psalms, how pleasant and good is it when brothers can sit together. Shehayu ohavinu umechabebin ze et ze, because they loved and cherished each other. Shebesha'a shenatal Moshe tamalchut v'Aaron et hakuna lo sanu ze et ze. When Moshe took the kingship and Aaron took the kuhuna, there was no jealousy, there was no hatred, there was no sense of my younger brother is taking what should rightfully be mine, or how come he's so much more beloved than I am and gets all of the gifts. But they were honestly and full-heartedly joyous for each other. And the proof in this is further on in the Tanchuma. When Moses was charged with his mission to Paro, then Moses desisted. Send it with someone else. Why? I don't want to do this. It's not that Moshe he was afraid or he was somehow reluctant. Where was his distress coming from? Amar Moshe, Ad shalo amarati haya Aaron achi mitnabe lahem b'Mitzrayim shmonim shana. Who am I to come and take over my older brother's prestigious position as leader of Am Yisrael? Uminayin sha'Aaron haya mitnabe lahem b'Mitzrayim. Where do we learn that Aaron? For lack of time, I'm just going to skip ahead. Aaron was a prophet to them, to the prophet to the Israelites in Egypt. Amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu Moshe. God says to Moshe, Lo echpat la'Aaron b'davar zeh. You really don't know your brother. Not only is Aaron not going to be bothered by you coming and taking the leadership role, Lo dai she'eno metzer. Not only is it not going to bother him, Ela ot sameach, but he's going to be so happy that you're realizing your destiny. Teidalecha she'amar lo. And you will know that this is so. In the language that the verse uses, he's going to come out and greet you and he's going to see you and his heart will be happy. It's not just that he'll see you and he'll be happy to see you and his heart is happy just because he finally is reunited with a brother who he lost when the brother was 3 months old. Right? But he will reunite with you in the sense of looking at someone whose destiny is fulfilled. Eino omer v'samach b'fiv, o v'samach bilvad, ela v'samach b'libo. Not just he's going to play lip service to it, or stam, he's happy, but truly his heart is happy. Do you know what this happiness is? I'll tell you the example that my Rav gives me as to what this happiness is. This is the happiness of watching the Olympics and watching Michael Phelps beat the world record. That's a universal happiness where we look at someone who has an extraordinary potential and we root for him to fulfill his potential. The glory of Levi, who insisted on his own integrity, but beyond that, insisted and gloried in and rejoiced in the success and achievement of the other, is that same feeling that we feel when we see others achieve. It's easy for us to do when we're watching the Olympics because very few of us are competitive athletes, right? So there's not a sense of jealousness. There's no sense of, oh, put me in the pool with Michael Phelps and let's see what happens. Okay, do not. But that's why it's easy for us to understand in that example of the Olympics. But what was true and genuine with Aaron was, this is exactly who Moshe is meant to be. And so the joy that I feel is a joy at someone becoming exactly who they are meant to be and exceeding, any kind of limitations that he might have placed of himself. And look at this gorgeous midrash, and we're nearing our end here. Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Halev shesamach b'gedulat achiv, the heart that rejoices in the greatness of his brother, Yavo v'yismach v'yobash urim v'tumim. That is a heart on which can sit all of the glory of Israel. The Urim V'Tumim, the priestly breastplate, which contains the promise and potential of each tribe, only on a heart that can truly rejoice in his brother's success can all the potential of Israel reside. And so, so when it comes to Levi, and Levi's unique role in Am Yisrael, just in 5 minutes that we have left, I want to sum up what we've discussed. Levi clearly comes into his own as a tribe, and overturns the curse that was leveled upon him by Yaakov, that arur apam ki az, cursed is their anger, for it is fierce. But if Levi takes that anger and he channels it towards kana'ut lahashem, towards not an ego-driven jealousy, but a divine-driven zealousness for what is right, then he becomes something totally different than what that curse seemed to determine would be his fate. He formed his own fate and became the tribe that is in service of God for all time. Pinchas took that a step further, and so then the family of Pinchas became even a more rarefied caste of servants to God. But we saw how the sages did not hesitate to read back all of this auspiciousness and specialness into Levi from the very outset. And they will then take it forward and reinterpret the curse that Yaakov gave to Levi. We'll just look at this last midrash together. Achalkem b'Yaakov, I shall divide them among Yaakov. V'afitzim b'Yisrael, I'll disperse them among Israel. V'chol mishem misavev ala p'tachim mishipto shel Shimon. So we looked with Shimon, all the schnurrers are from Shimon. They can't sustain themselves in their nachala. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, af Levi yehe misavev. Levi too shall have to travel around. Me'as HaKadosh Baruch Hu he'achilo parnasato b'nikiyut. But his sustenance is going to come not from having to humiliate himself, but cleanly. Shnit kaima gzerat Yaakov, so that Yaakov's decree would be fulfilled, but in a dignified way. Gidlo HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'natan lo echad me'asara. God insists that Israel tithe their produce to the Levites. V'hu misaveh v'omer tnuli chelki. And he doesn't go around and ask for handouts. He goes around and says, give me what is my due. L'chach ne'amar achalkem b'Yaakov. I will divide them in Yaakov. We can't talk about the nachala of Levi because it is a nachala of cities, 48 individual cities, as you see, scattered fully within the tribes of Israel. Of course, over on the Ever HaYarden, the eastern side of the Jordan as well, which of course is part of biblical Eretz Yisrael. And so the Achalkem b'Yaakov, Afitzim b'Yisrael is like literal and also figurative. Literal in that they literally had holdings all over Eretz Yisrael. Figurative in that they are found in every single nachala allows for an integration of the nation with their leadership that is quite astounding in its design, in that Am Yisrael is not supplied with a leadership that is a spiritual leadership for which they are not distant. They don't have to travel to Shiloh and they don't have to travel to Yerushalayim for some kind of a spiritual inspiration. Now, of course, spiritual inspiration is democratized. It's not only in the purview of the Levites. It's not that one must be a Levi in order to be spiritually inspiring, but the job of the Levi is, when he is not in service of God in the Mishkan of the temple, is to teach. And so the Rambam says that the Shevet Levi is reinterpreted in every generation as the teachers of Israel, and those and I'm certain that wherever we are all found around the world, we have Anshe Levi within our midst, and so our time has come to an end. I'm going to look at the comments, but I do again just want to remind everyone that next week we're starting with Yehuda, and the following week there is no shiur. Okay, so let me see.
Can you just give us your email again? Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Let me write it on the chat. Okay, and then I'll get to all the questions. Oh, I didn't do that properly. Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Kitov twice on Yom Shlishi of creation. Thank you. I think that there's no end to all of these associations. Once we start. Okay, Aleph Bet Gimel is what? Wait, Varda, you said Aleph Bet Gimel 1 + 2 = 3. Yeah. Oh, okay. I understand. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, I guess it could be. Yeah, that makes sense. Does everyone understand what Varda was saying? Varda, you still there? Okay. What she was saying is that, like if we're trying to get to 3, then Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, and then Aleph 1 and 2 will get to 3. I still don't see how that's Otiot Tavshel Torah. To me, that the language of the Midrash seemed to say this is the foundational building block of the Torah. So I thought it was more in terms of like, the dialectical the dialectical pattern, I guess, of thesis, synthesis, antithesis. Anyway, sounds a little like the Trinity concept, Sima. You know what? You're right. And why the Trinity is such a strong concept? It's because of the tripartite aspect to it. There's something deeply human. I'm not a student of art. I'm not a student of aesthetics. I'm not a student of, but all I can say is what speaks to me on some kind of a subconscious level is 3 far more than 2. Perhaps 1 I can grow towards understanding. Maybe this is resonating with some of you. I don't know if this makes sense, but I do think that you're right, Sima, and I think that that's a deeply satisfying concept, the Trinity too. But that's for a different talk. Tripartite bracha, like the bracha hamushalev, like the bracha mushaleshet before Matan Torah. What's the bracha mushaleshet before Matan Torah, Gershon?
3.
What do you?
It's 3 days. 3 days of Hagbalah.
Oh, the Shloshat Yimei Hagbala. Okay, but what's the bracha mushaleshet?
Well,
Birkat HaKohanim.
Birkat HaKohanim. Oh, okay. Like Yivarecha Hashem Yishmerecha Yitzan. Okay, the 3 parts of that. Yes.
It's the first Aliyah before getting the Torah.
Okay.
Given to the Kohen.
Given to the Kohen. Yes. Okay. The 3, yes, in the Birkat HaKohanim. Thank you. The 3 letters may imply basic building blocks, essentials, simple as ABC. Right? And then we don't have to continue on. That just means that's what we're moving towards. Wait 1 second, Sandra. Well, just 1 second. Magen David is 2 triangles. And then I don't know. I can't talk about the Magen David intelligently because it's not an ancient symbol. And so I don't even, and maybe someone who's an art historian, maybe, is that why it's satisfying? Because of the triangle? 3 days without water in the desert, symbolizing going no more than 3 days without reading from the Torah. So Yofi, that's right. We don't read for more than 3 days without the Torah. Delicious
3
irony.
angels.
The 3 angels. I think the 3, there's something, now we can do this with any number, right? Echad miyodea, arba miyodea, like there, it's just, there's something about 3. And I'm failing to articulate it clearly, but yeah, Sandra, yes.
Okay, got this, only because I'm the mother of 3 mathematicians. So we're dealing with, oh my gosh, they would be laughing at me and saying, Mommy, see, it comes full circle. Isn't 3 the first prime number? A prime number can only be divided by itself in 1. And so when you're dealing with prime numbers, they have so much power because they're prime building blocks of everything that comes afterwards.
Wait,
So,
what happened? You're muted. Okay.
No. So
from a mathematical point of view, there's
from a
something.
Point of view, aren't we dealing with 3 as the first prime number? A prime number being divisible only by itself and by the number 1. And when you're dealing with prime numbers, and when you mentioned to yourself, to us, you say, God, I'm hopeless at Kabbalah. I am like less than hopeless on mathematics, but at least my children know it. But the fact of being the first prime number and the power of a prime number being the building blocks of every other prime number. And so you can almost see the entire system of numbers, prime numbers, numerology, so powerful, is all weighing, tipped on the first prime number, which is 3.
The first 3.
Absolutely can see the power of 3 hugely, even just from a mathematical standpoint.
Absolutely.
That goes along with the building blocks of 1 + 2 = 3.
3.
At first prime. And isn't it amazing that it can only be divided by itself or by the number 1? And of course, God is 1. So there's so much. I can take a little walk on this, but you asked, how do we see it as an Aleph Bet Gimel? It popped into my head at the beginning of this year, and I've sort of been wiggling in my seat thinking, is it right? Is it nonsense? Or is it something?
No, how could it be nonsense? It's so true. It's
prime number divided by itself or 1.
And whoever's gonna, now I don't know if any of you are thirdborns or if you have a thirdborn, and there's just something there's a satisfaction. I don't know how to put it. It's like a in the 3, it's like I always, maybe it's an OCD element to me, but I don't do well with the 2s. The 3 will allow me to breathe deep. So while I'm not a mathematical.
So they're always a tiebreaker, Tamar.
That's right. That's right. The synthesis.
You have tripartite, being a lawyer, I mean, you have tripartite courts. You're very unlikely to have a court of 2, but you can have one, and certainly should have one, of 3. And often in Torah also, they say it would be Moshe, Israel, and God as the 3rd, because you need that. It's always got to be 3 being the number prime. It just makes so much sense.
It does. It does. I think somebody needs to write something about this.
I think oh, good.
I'm sure it's been written, and but I just, in terms of the Torah, and I'm not talking about numerology. I'm just saying like this particular aspect of the strength of Levi, particularly as number 3.
And wild, isn't it, that Moshe says Mil Hashem a lie, so that he's not even allowing for numbers 4, 5, and 6. He's basically saying 3 is the prime. It's divisible only by God and a lie.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's the yeah. Okay, so moving moving through the rest of these comments. Delicious irony that the tribe of Levi is credited by the Midrash with observing Mila in Mitzrayim, the one who flagrantly abused this Israelite custom in Shechem. Yes, yes. There's Ruth, I don't know if did you get a chance to I wrote an article on Shechem and about Mila. I'm just writing myself a note to send you Mila and Shechem, because it talks about Mila and Levi and Shechem. And I don't think that I ever pointed that. I never put 2 and 2 together, that, 2 different books, but it definitely dovetails with that same idea. In other words, you're pointing out that the Levim were makbid on Mila in Mitzrayim, and whereas they abused the Mila in Shechem, and one must be a tikkun for the other. The event, Shechem's their city. Shechem is the city of Levi. Levi is Shechem sits in the valley between Har Gerizim and Har Eval, and that's where the Levium were in the Ma'amad HaBrachot VaHaklalot. And Shechem is one of the Arei Miklat, so it's one of the prime cities of Levi. So it's on a city of Shimon. Levi has to be embedded within that whole Mila and crooked Mila. By the way, it takes all kinds of turns. I don't want to go on and belabor this because I'm just having too many thoughts, but I'm going to send you that article. And if you have time, I'd appreciate if you read it and gave me your thoughts. Okay, the trait of zeal that Shimon and Levi shared in Shechem's story seems to be used here at the Egal story for righteous, although painful, cause of tikkun in a way. Absolutely, where they're directing their kanaut in the proper way. From personal experience. Oh, thank you, Rivka. Thank you. Yes, we didn't get to Jish and Meron, but yes, we had a really good time together. Thank you. There's my email. Thank you so much, Betsy. I love you. Thank you. It's my cousin Betsy. What's the connection between the three wells of Abraham? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't think about all the threes in the Torah. That's definitely something to think of, and the perfection of it definitely it means a synthesis on some level. I don't know. Length, width, and height are all dimensions on which other dimensions are built on polygons. Oh, I have no idea. Jennifer, if anyone here is still, in the game, I don't know. Math for me ended in 12th grade. So I don't know. My pleasure, Rivka. If anyone has any answer to Jennifer's question, then anyway, with my very limited knowledge on that, I wish you all a wonderful day, and Bezrat Hashem, we'll meet again next week.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.